Hello, everybody. For the first time, and I've been trying to get him on for a very long time, we have a veteran lawfare campaigner and a independent, I shall say, defence analyst. And we have David Ellis. He won't be new to many of you who look on YouTube and have seen him in various guises across the alternative spectrum, if I can put it that way. David, you're very welcome. Unfortunately, this week, we have had a Prime Minister who has yet again sold this country completely down the river where the EU is concerned. But we want specifically to talk about defence and what it means to our armed forces and our security services. David, you're very welcome. Please carry.
He's pitching to everyone that he's made a super deal with the EU. And as was the policy that they stated in their Labour manifesto at the general election, seek a defence pact with the EU. So just, what does that mean? Where's the destination and the sort of whys and wherefores of it all? It's particularly apt, Liz, that we're doing this today on the anniversary of Operation Dynamo and Dunkirk. So the question is, what is the Prime Minister's policy with this pact and what is the destination? Because he's pitching it to everyone that it's all cotton wool and fluffy and lovely and it's a great deal for everyone in defence and security to have this pact with the EU, and it's going to be great for jobs and our industry. And you can see all the number 10 machinery and the press releases on this and the way that they're trying to politically convince everyone this is a really good idea. Now, but that, ladies and gentlemen, is in the context of abject apolitical silence from the other parties, apart from a couple of individuals. There's a Liberal MP and even a Tory MP that are actually supporting Keir Starmer with this pact. All right, now he's calling it a pact. Now, what I'm going to suggest to everyone is that we need to differentiate between what the Prime Minister is trying to politically pitch us, and what von der Leyen is talking about in the EU, and she has for some time as well. Liz, you've had a long-standing interest in this area. So von der Leyen is talking in Brussels about EU defence and security union, right? Nobody else in Brussels in the EU zone is talking about a pact, right? So we've got Prime Minister going, pact, we're going to have a pact, nothing to see, move on. And von der Leyen talking about union, okay? Now, let's just clarify, because von der Leyen has stated in terms openly what's the destination for her and the EU's critical and essential, as Tony Blair has worded this, concept of European defence under European Defence and Security Union. And that is that the destination they want, single point command and control of all defence and security services from Brussels. Now, this is when I say all defence services, that's Navy, Air Force, Army, Special Forces, everything, and all the security services, okay? All the way through from secrets and intelligence, all the way through to coalface policing. It affects everything, right? This is the whole nature of the single point concept. And one single point managed EU defence contractor. So she wants all the defence industry unified as well. So this is the correct terminology, union. So it's a process of unification, and they want to unify. Now, what I'm going to submit is, in terms of the challenge in calling this very glaringly obvious difference in the way that they're trying to articulate this, politically put it over to the public. So Starmer going pact, von der Leyen's talking about union. So, okay, Prime Minister, what's the destination of your pact? And how do you retain autonomy in defence and security? How do you retain policy control in foreign policy at the point when you're bridging across into EU having autonomy in this? Now, the rules are very simple with the EU text in this. Is basically their ambition is they want everything. They want it all, okay? And you cannot be in one part of EU defence and security union, and there's an enormous structure with the largest aggregation of acronyms known anywhere on Earth, and not be in all of it. Now, this was called out by Sir Richard Dearlove and Professor Christian Prince at numerous parliamentary select committees, both EU affairs and foreign affairs committees. And who do the EU put in charge of intelligence, Liz? Greece. I mean, where's that come from? So just going back to what Starmer has done. So what's happened is he's formally initiated us into the process of unification with the EU, and he's telling everyone it's a pact. Well, what does that mean? And where are we going with all this? What does that mean for our armed services, our security services, and our defense industry, what's left of it? So that's the challenge, is what we've got to do is say to the Prime Minister, this policy of yours, Mr. Keir Starmer, where's the destination for it? Because you're saying it's a pact, and von der Leyen's talking about defence union. Now, the critical bit that everybody has to understand is that the deal that he's just initiated with the EU is more or less the same as the Theresa May deal that she tried to slip in the back door in the backstop in her deal process. Now, a few of us mounted a campaign against that, and I was very fortunate to work with Anne Widdecombe on this and one or two others, and she led the charge to push back against it, because, you know, what it meant is we would essentially be a rule taker. You know, autonomy in this area would go, and it would be a competence of Brussels, not a competence of Parliament. Not that Parliament, to be brutally honest, has a great deal of competence, but this situation will make it worse. It will lose it. So the point is we wanted to get the competence back. We wanted to take back control. Wasn't that the whole gambit? Now, the chronology is critical to understand really the magnitude of this shenanigans. So Margaret Thatcher was asked for defence union in 1984 with Jacques Delors, and what they wanted to do was reinvigorate the EU, which obviously was constructed to stop France and Germany fighting each other. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Okay. Now, the implementation of it in terms of coal, steel, fishing, and everything else, and agriculture, shockingly bad for what it's done for us. You know, we've not benefited terribly. It's a detrimental impact. Now think defence and security, right? So what Jacques Delors said to Maggie was, what we need to do with the EU is, so bearing in mind, height of the Cold War, SS-20s, Soviet, major issue. We want this. We want defence union. We want currency union. We want a unified, common currency, and we want common defence. And then we want to take the national veto away. Remember that point, national veto. I'll come back to it because it's very important. So that's the recipe. So, and I know all this because Lord Tebbit told me. A lot of the inner workings that we went into were secret at the time, and still appear to be so, to be fair. But the recipe hasn't changed. So we want to unify everything. Now, Maggie famously said, no, 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 right? Was very adamant about that, because what she said in terms of the defence was, and this was done at the dispatch box a few times, but didn't go into any great length, was that she'd said no to the defence union because the destination wasn't clear. Where will it go? And she's absolutely correct. Now that remains the same, and it's very much what I've just submitted in terms of Keir Starmer. What is the destination of what you're doing with this? You can call it whatever you like, because Theresa May used to use this fantastic rotating language so nobody could latch on and understand what she was talking about. She used to talk about cooperation, partnership, all sorts of describing words to cover up really what was going on, which was we would unify. Now, this is the tricky bit, because Tony Blair, after having the table laid up by John Major, actually initiated from the treaties, so St. Malo and then Lisbon, the Sleeping Beauty of Lisbon, with Jacques Chirac in 2000, and initiated the EU defence concept. But the concept is defence union. So they tend to not want to use that word, because people in Britain will go, what? Hang on, they'll defence union? No. Hang on a sec. What's that? We want to go in with France and Germany militarily, and have it commanded from Brussels. how does that work? You know, I think there'll be a big balking at that. I think the majority in Britain will oppose it, and the majority could be found. And this is very interesting because Reform are silent on this, and that they know all about it because I was working with Colonel Frederick Cheetham, who was their defence spokesperson, post working with Anne Widdecombe as the Brexit Party, and all this was ready to rock and roll. But the poor chap had a heart attack, and then nothing's happened with it. And there isn't a Reform defence and security spokesperson, or it hasn't been since that point. So post Blair initiating it, what happened was our heads of service supported this to such an extent that we even headed up the EU military staff with our own Lieutenant General Sir David Leakey, who subsequently became Black Rod. So they know all about it in Whitehall. This is not a secret in Whitehall. It's not known by the general public, but you know, everybody in Whitehall that's in this knows about it. We've had a lot of senior officers work over there, and our own heads of service support it. Now, interestingly, one First Sea Lord I met at Defence Committee who had supported this, and in the lobby, in and out of committee, I sort of challenged him on it. And he said, well, yes, well, I supported it, you know, because I was asked and invited to do that. And what we were doing, we was heading up something called EU NAVFOR, which is EU Navy. So you can see the you know, the way that they do EU NAVFOR, EU Navy, EU Naval Force. So the army will be called EU4, EU Force, and the Air Force will be EU Air Force, right? You know, this sort of thing. So I said, well, you know, what's what? Because I actually was the one that exposed what they were doing there with our own Royal Navy, effectively being, you know, quite a big component of EU Navy, which was called EU4. And it was, and he said, well, I did it, you know, but I don't think it'll work, right, like that. Now, all the other officers that I've ever lobbied with on this in Parliament, so both Lords and Commons, have all said the same. I can't find one that thought it was a good idea, right? But of course, the officers are not in charge. The civil servants are in charge. And those same civil servants that have blocked all these other things because they're hell-bent on the settings, which are, you know, we have ever closer union, and that includes defence, are actually doing this in the Cabinet Office. So Starmer has got Ollie Robbins back to facilitate this. He's now in charge of the Foreign Office. So the Foreign Office is in charge of the MOD, you understand. That he's been brought back in order to do this. Now they're doing it piecemeal, you know, not too much first, salami slicing in. It's all brilliant. It'll be great for jobs. The pitch, you can look at, and as our Brexit hero, Sir Richard Dearlover, said, you can't be in one bit without being in all of it. And unfortunately, as it's a reams and reams and reams of bureaucracy, and as Lord Attlee said, you know, he was opposed to being in the EU. We don't want to be dictated to by EU bureaucrats. It's a dictatorship of bureaucrats. So this is exactly what we're looking at. But the major problem is our end in Whitehall. You know, the EU, really, to be fair to them, are very open about what they're doing and talking about. Ursula von der Leyen is very open and honest about what she's submitting. Now, the cloaking and the shenanigans is our side of the channel, not theirs. Now you've got German political figures now, so obviously it must have been a civil servant or secret conversation, all talking about, as far as they're concerned, it's all in. Now what that means is that's nukes as well, ladies and gents. Now Britain is a nuclear power, and as we've heard from our Brexit friend Dominic Cummings, we've got real serious problems with our nuclear deterrence. And he's been very open about those issues. Now, this isn't in Parliament. There's absolutely no resistance in Parliament at all, or debate. There isn't even the start of the parliamentary process where a body of MPs would want to debate something, challenge it, and then force the government to go one way or the other with it. So currently, yes, the process has started. The Pact has been agreed and signed yesterday. So the start of the process has happened. And I believe, we could probably do it as a question, you know, has the Prime Minister done this under royal prerogative, or was it done in council? So, I mean, Privy Council. So you're dealing where we were doing all sorts of things like supporting it with military officers in Brussels who were over there busily working. Frederick Cheetham was one of them. There, it was the ex-reform chap. He worked in there on this in the EU. But, you know, the general public in Britain had no idea what was going on, that we were part way in. Now, the problem and the context is all with this. So, do you remember the gambit in the referendum about we were going to take back control of this, this, and this, laws, borders, and customs? Right, so we've not done terribly well with any of that. However, they couldn't at the time say, well, we're going to take back control of defence and security because we were already part way in, because Blair and Cameron had committed to support it under royal prerogative, I would assume, or in council. Didn't go in Parliament, no vote on it. So that was held out. Now, I got that confirmed from Admiral Lord Boyce, former Chief of Defence Staff, former head of the Navy, and Knight Garter. That was confirmed to me immediately before the referendum, that all this was held out and it had been agreed by all parties. Now, my gambit and his gambit and all the other officers was that we needed a greater debate on defence and security in this country. We needed to raise the levels of awareness because of the looming threats globally that we were facing. And we were within a context of David Cameron, and he wasn't the only prime minister, but he really put the military in a situation where it could no longer intervene anywhere. And as Admiral Sandy Woodward said famously, you know, we couldn't intervene anywhere further than the Channel. And he's absolutely correct. I'm happy to rely on what he's saying. Now, that personally is unacceptable. So the current government policy with our military is that it's set as a reserve-backed deterrent force. So I would submit it's not really doing terribly well at doing that, because the recruitment, retention, and morale is woeful because of all of these policies. And we're suffering from this lawfare problem because of the ECHR, another problem. We're suffering from horrific gaps in national security, where we're seeing intelligence gaps, where all sorts of things are happening, where adversaries are running riot, literally, because of the intelligence failings. And I think probably at this point, it'd be good to point out, you know, when people like Tony Blair and Keir Starmer say our or we, right, that means the EU, not the UK. When he says our security, Theresa May used to do this. Our security, but she means the EU, not the UK. So, so it's currently set as a deterrent force. Obviously, the arsenal's drained because Ben Wallace was supporting the Ukraine, and the big issue was, of course, the adversaries could see the depth of our arsenals, and they knew full well what our magazines held and how vulnerable we are now because of the procurement system is so badly broken. And the procurement now will kick in with the EU. The EU will want common procurement, and they'll start with ammunition. So, ladies and gentlemen, just consider that. The EU making ammunition, issuing ammunition, and controlling ammunition. Now, it'll start with bullets and it'll start with artillery shells, but it won't stop there. It will go on to every kind of ordnance you can think of. But Keir Starmer is telling everyone that will be great for British jobs, because obviously, you know, there will be some work, all right? And there may be some deals to be done where, you know, this company gets that, or, well, but you've got to do what we want you to do. You'll have to, you know, you'll have to sort of submit. You can see how this will work or not. Well, it will work for the EU, and obviously, I think the opinion amongst the intelligence apparatchi and the military apparatchi and the officers that this will be German-led, and then they'll be back to this battle of the French arms industry and how that works. So this is going to be beyond hard, because obviously our